Sherburne Regional School Committee meeting on February 3rd. We're beginning this meeting at 7:28 in the middle school library. Before we get started, do I have to do community comments?
No, we're going to do that after the presentation, so people have information to work with.
So first we're going to start with the Student Council representative. Thank you for staying.
So thank you, Evelyn.
Hello everyone, I see a couple of new faces, so I'm just going to reintroduce myself. My name is Evelyn Paul. I'm a sophomore and I'm the Student Council Committee Rep for Dover-Sherburne High School. And I'm going to do a short presentation about Student Council's plans for the next couple of months. So we are going to be hosting our annual blood drive on March 6th. It is a full day event where students and teachers get to donate with blood. We work with Red Cross and it's really great. They walk us through the entire progress. They're very professional. And we have some statistics that DSHS has had 840 donors and has collected 664 units of blood over 16 blood drives, averaging 42 units per drive. And according to Red Cross, 1 pint of blood can save 3 lives, which means that Dover-Sherburne has potentially saved 1,992 lives.
Oh, wow.
So it is pretty impactful. I think it is a pretty good opportunity. It's 16 and up, so if you guys have any kids at Dover-Sherburne 16 and up, I would recommend they participate. Next up, we have town hall meetings, which are basically these assemblies where we get student opinion to ensure that DSHS can keep on improving. Traditionally, they were held as in-person assemblies, but I think after COVID, we transitioned to surveys, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't enjoy them, and I don't think my peers did either. So we want to restart in-person assemblies in order to get more participation and to help to get a lot of voice from our student body. And that is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so I think next is ours.
I appreciate you staying.
Yes, we're sorry it took so long. So it appears next, you're up for the superintendent comments.
Great, and I think there's anybody on Zoom, so if you can just shut it down. Okay, so we are halfway through the school year. Congratulations for all of the hard work to our students and our teachers. And we're already planning for next year, both with the budget and with programming. It's an interesting time because we have the Instructional Leadership Study, which started in July of 2024 that you heard about on June 13th, is finally coming to some proposals.
January 13th.
January 13th, yeah. So we've had a year and a half of the Instructional Leadership Study, and here we are with a proposal. Then we've had a year of elementary schedule studying, which Jenny just presented to the Dover and Sherburne committees that I'll give you a brief overview of, coming to a head right now as well. Interestingly enough, it's the same year as a negotiation year, so we're working with our educators to make sure that they have a fair and competitive contract, and we're in the midst of version 2.0 of the budget. So it's like the perfect storm of information coming together, but I want to be clear that these were originally all different silos. There was the Instructional Leadership Study, there was the Elementary Time Study, there's negotiations, and then there's looking at enrollment and budgeting. All different, but here we are sitting at the table, so we're going to keep them different, and I'm going to try to be clear about what decisions would have been made regardless of budget. So that said, I also want to say, for those of you who were on the calendar committee, as you know, most of us went into the calendar committee looking at holidays with one opinion, did all of the research, had all the conversations, got all the feedback, and came out feeling differently. The studies you're about to hear about are 2 more examples that Denny and I have lived through where I went in thinking one thing and came out feeling very strongly a different way. And so here we go. So just to give you some context of the larger ecosystem that we're working within, the town of Dover, or excuse me, I'll start with the town of Sherburne is facing an $847,000 budget deficit when they take all of the department budgets and put them together. And they're asking the schools to reduce their budgets by $500,000 in order to avoid an override. The town of Dover is confronting nearly $5 million in capital expenses that must either be funded in the near term or deferred, which of course has an impact on their overall municipal budget. So both towns are facing some fiscal restraints and asking the schools to be more fiscally responsible and more reflective than they typically do. So So what does that mean for us? We're at a pivotal moment. We have 2 studies with recommendations, and as you'll soon see, our enrollment is decreasing. And so how do all these factors come together and affect the budget one way or the other? Through that, as we look at all 3 buckets of the 2 studies and enrollment, I want to be clear that our goal as a district is to maintain academic excellence for all of our kids. That's why we all moved here. That's why we all pay the taxes. That's why we are a renowned district. That we do not want to change. And we realize we have to reduce the budget requests. In doing so, we want to maintain current programming. We want to make sure that at any level, particularly at the high school, all of the amazing programs and courses that our kids have had access to, they continue to have access to, and that the small class sizes that we're known for continue, because we know that's so important for students' learning, for their engagement, and really the relationships that we know that they develop with their teachers. So we do not want to cut at the bone. We do not want to affect students' experience. We just want to find places where we can squeeze, where hopefully it will not be, felt by the students. And we want to minimize disruption for students and staff. So let's rewind to January 13th. I won't go over the whole presentation again unless you want me to. But I'll just give you the highlights, right? So this started in July of 2024, so a year and a half ago. So as we think about the vision for the district, we want all of our students to graduate with a portrait of a graduate competencies, which are applicable to whatever they do in the future and whatever job they have and however that job changes. And we want our curriculum to be relevant, meaning the kids know why they're learning it, they're excited to learn it. Instruction is student-centered, which means the students are doing the hard work of learning and having to make connections and draw conclusions and really having that deeper learning experience. And then our assessments should be authentic. So of course we want our students to have access to an array of different kinds of assessments that they can learn and practice, but we also want to make sure that there's opportunities for them to doing real projects that would happen in the real world and applying their knowledge to life outside of school with authentic audiences. So when Denny and I did our strategic planning, our entry plan 4 years ago, one of the buckets that came out of that plan based on feedback from students, educators, parents, community members was around professional learning and growth and making sure that we're supporting our teachers in this new era of teaching and learning. One of the directives was to examine the current leadership model to ensure adequate instructional support to achieve the district's vision for 21st century teaching and learning. So if we want a relevant curriculum, student-centered instruction, and authentic assessments, do we have enough supports in place to make those shifts in the classroom? So we started July 2024, and here we are January 2026 when we had the presentation. As you remember, we found that teachers with leadership positions at any level, elementary, middle, or high school, have the greatest impact on the teaching of their peers and can really help move the needle in terms of what we want to see in the classroom. When we provide them with training and time, and teachers with ongoing feedback, not a one-time professional development, but getting constant feedback from a teacher leader or an instructional leader is really what's important to change practice. We've heard K-12 that the supervision and evaluation model that we have in place sometimes feels like a check the box, put it in the drawer, and that's not the goal. We don't all invest our time and energy in observing classes, having meaningful conversations for that to be the case. So how can we improve that? And then vertical articulation, you've heard me say before, Denny is currently responsible for 8 disciplines across 13 grade levels, and he's doing the best he can, but are there better ways that we can make sure that our curriculum is aligned all the way through? As you know, we triangulated data. We got a lot of feedback from our educators. We looked at research and we looked at comparable districts. What we noticed are 2 things here, and you heard this January 13th. When you look at department chairs at other comparable districts, and these are the districts we always look to saying, what are they doing? Whether they're 6 through 12 department chairs or just high school department chairs, oftentimes they only teach 2 or 3 out of 5 classes and have the rest of the time for leadership. Our high school department chairs teach 4 out of 5, which I think has lots of pros and a few cons. The pros is that they remain active in the classroom, they're practitioners, they're working with kids, they're developing relationships. As this group here said, they're some of the best teachers in the building, so we want them in the classroom. We don't want them, being pulled out for leadership things. And there are leadership things to be done, so, who is going to do that work in replace of that? We also learned by looking at our comparable districts that there is this idea of curriculum coordinators, that yes, there's an assistant superintendent, and yes, there's high school department chairs, middle school curriculum leaders, some sort of name for elementary instructional leaders, but also many of these districts have either K-5, K-8, 6 to 12, K to 12, people who pick up these subject areas and work under the assistant superintendent to help make sure that vertical articulation in all of those 8 disciplines exists. You see that some districts have them at the elementary level, some have them all the way through. Most districts have at least 2, some have 3. And like we talked about in January, Wellesley's an outlier. They have more kids, more staff, so they can afford, the economy of size to have 1 in each discipline. So the proposal that you heard in January was, we looked at 3 models. We looked at department chairs being 6 through 12. That was not appealing because middle school and high school teachers really wanted access to people who understand their kids and their discipline. So we didn't want them stretched across 2 buildings. We said, okay, how about if we give the curriculum leaders, the middle school and the high school leaders, high school department chairs, fewer classes to teach and more time to do this work? And they said, no, we're practitioners. We want to be with kids. Their colleagues said that's what makes them special. So we said, okay, well, then how do we, find the training, find the time, find the, articulation leadership that we need? And we came up with the idea of having these 2, not 3, not 9, 2 K-12 curriculum coordinators. One that would oversee all the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math disciplines, K-12, and one that would oversee the humanities, which is world language, English, social studies, etc. And those people would work with Denny so that together, they can provide support to all grade levels across all disciplines. What this position, as we talked about in January, would do would be aligning those programs, including the curriculum and the resources that are used K-12. They would support the curriculum leaders and the department chairs in planning and leading professional development for their departments, either at meetings or on early release days. They would be able to go to the next level of data analysis and making sure that students are actually learning skills and making progress. They could help, they'd be more hands on deck for the evaluation system, so we could all take a little bit more time to do it and have a little bit more conversation. The elementary coaches wouldn't have to do curriculum and coaching and data, because these people could help. So they could focus more of their time on classroom instruction, which is what a coach is supposed to do. They would provide additional training and feedback for our leaders, our instructional leaders, which they asked for. And then as various topics come up, which there is a list of topics that need to, and projects that need to be done, they can help. So for example, most urgently, the elementary's just rolled out a new math program. They're about to pilot a literacy program, rolling that out K through 5 in 2 schools. Literacy is a fairly important topic. That's going to be a big lift. So, if Denny is focusing as much time on literacy as he did on math, again, there's not much bandwidth left to focus on the other disciplines and the other schools. What you'll hear about in a second is that we're shifting at the elementary school to make sure that students have enough time to do science, social studies, engineering, health. That kind of got away from us during the pandemic. We need to bring that back. These people would help us re-pick up those curriculum, find the resources, and help support the teachers to teach in areas that they haven't for a while, or perhaps new areas. Another example is as our students roll up from the elementary schools with Reveal Math to the middle school, and soon a new literacy program to the middle school, who can help bring that knowledge and adjust practices there for the kids. So those are the things we'd ideally get done. What does this mean for the budget? The additional time and compensation, the middle and high school instructional leaders, the curriculum leaders and department chairs are doing more. So they've come forth with a proposal saying, here's our actual job descriptions now, and we would like to increase our stipends. The middle school, or the high school teachers, I said, do teach 4 out of 5. The middle school curriculum leaders today still teach 5 out of 5, so they don't have any time. So what the proposal is that both middle school and high school leaders teach 4 out of 5, so we give the middle school folks some time finally, and then we increase their stipends. So increasing those stipends is going to be an increase of $25,000 to your budget. It's not in your budget yet because it still hasn't been agreed to by the DSEA at the table. We're still negotiating this, but that is a potential add to your budget. The 2 curriculum coordinator positions, we ballparked those as being about $140,000 each. One in STEM, one in humanities. We'd spread that across the 3 districts. And, similar to how Denny is split, it's not a 30-30-30. It would be split. So Dover's budget would pick up $56,000 to have access to those 2 coordinators, same as Sherburne. And the region, it would be a $168,000 add to have access to those 2 coordinators. We have a $850,000 deficit at the in Sherburne. We're being asked to cut our budget by $500,000, and as you'll see as we talk about in part 2 and part 3 of this presentation, we're making cuts to teaching positions. We're hoping that at the elementary level, it's a positive thing for the curriculum and the experience of the kids. At the high school and middle school level, we're hoping it doesn't have an impact on their educational experience, their class size, their access to courses. That said, I think that we should make these changes and see how the dust settles before we move forward with adding additional administrative positions, which may have to then come off the table next year if we need to further support our students. So that will leave this work to be done by Denny, the principals, the department chairs, the curriculum leaders, and we'll just have to prioritize what projects get done. So really the only ask moving forward is if all agree between the DSEA and the school committee, there'll be a $25,000 add to support the work of the curriculum and department chairs. So before I move on into the second study, does anybody have any questions or feedback based on what you heard January 13th and then now what you're hearing on February 3rd?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to see this because you sort of painted a really good picture as to how this can benefit all the students going forward. Understand the sort of budget shortfalls. I'm just wondering if there's a stepped approach. So is there a way to test or pilot some of these instead of going all in on the positions? If there's some additional assistance or help, maybe even particularly at the elementary school as you're trying to figure out what ELA program to go with, as that's obviously a big determinant of how the success of this district is going to be going forward. And so without sort of the extra resources that you're initially planning, like is there a bridge, I guess? Like if we're gonna, hopefully this comes back and this isn't like just dead in the water. It's like maybe we look for a better year to do this, but if this isn't the year, is there are also other considerations just to make sure that we are implementing everything appropriately?
So the short-term Band-Aid is to continue to pay consultants to do some of the work that is urgent that we don't either have the expertise to do or the bandwidth. So as Dawn will tell you, in all three budgets, there is some consultancy money put in there in place of these positions. So Dover and Sherburne budgets is $20,000. At the region, it's $32,000 so that we can consult people to help us get some of these things done that need to get done sooner rather than later that we just don't have the bandwidth to do. So that's one option, is to keep us moving forward. The Sherburne and Dover school committees heard this presentation just an hour ago, and they are asking for additional feedback about, what both in practice and financially, what it looked like to maybe try one curriculum coordinator position next year versus two. So they've asked Dawn to run some numbers and see what that would look like and whether that's meaningful. I don't know how you all feel about that.
Because I was gonna. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say. So, if I synopsis be like, we're trying to get more in line with the community standard around us in the training teaching model, and then we're also balancing the budgets for the shortfall. But so my first question was, didn't the Senate just pass a version of the literacy curriculum where K through 3 would have grants available for implementation? And does the initial wording of that put us eligible for a grant that would support something like that?
Yeah, we're hoping we're going to need the $20,000 at each elementary school to do part of that work and what the grant would provide. Otherwise, we'd be asking.
So that's in addition to the presumed grant, but that hasn't passed.
Right.
Okay. And then
Sorry,
just one more
Sorry,
thing
Kim.
about grants is that often there are competitive grants.
okay,
So the money goes to districts with high percentages of students with disabilities or L's. So sometimes it's harder for us to
Right,
get.
free and reduced lunch is a huge
Yeah,
draw.
understandable.
Yeah.
And then I would just say, like, I hope it's the shortfalls in the budgets aren't just because we need new pickleball courts, because that would be extremely short-sighted.
I believe that is one of the requests on the Dover side, but I don't think they're approving that capital request.
Because that would be
So if we were to
Suboptimal.
choose one, then we'll have to decide or figure out, do some research as to which one if we have to choose, the STEM side or the literacy side. That would be one.
And my question too is because we are paying consultants for the things that we need like immediately. So I feel like we're still paying. I feel like we're kind of band-aiding, and I understand.
We're halfway there.
Yeah.
With one, with the additional consulting fees built into the budget.
Right.
So
and I just worry because, Denny, everyone is stretched so thin because it seems like everyone's wearing 500 hats. And that's why I was hoping we could have these positions filled, because I do feel like it would streamline some of our areas and it would really benefit the students. So I don't know, maybe some money will come up for version 3 that maybe we could find something.
Stay tuned.
We're
getting
I keep
there.
hoping. I don't know. Do we get any lottery money? I'm just kidding. But I do see the need for it. So, it is a disappointment because I feel like we're in between a rock and a hard place. Like, we have to do the budget and make sure that we're true to the budget, but also this is a need that, it's not a want. I feel like it's a need. I feel like for so long we've trying to keep running ahead, but there's just so much to absorb.
Right. It's a nice to have and a need, and I agree. I don't think it's a nice to have.
Right.
And
I think it's a
there's
need.
just a big through line of, obviously we have 2 different separate elementary schools run by 2 different principals, both doing really good jobs, but then we're combining them all together in the 6th grade with disjointed curriculum coming from the elementary schools into it. And like, everybody's doing their best, but I feel like that's one of the bigger drop-offs is really how do we make sure that we have that hidden the ground for success in 6th grade for everybody.
I have another question. So now that MCAS is a little bit, we're out of the picture or whatever, do you think the teachers are going to get a little bit more time so we can push it? Is it in a good way or a bad way? Do you think this is going to affect it at all?
So the MCAS are no longer a graduation requirement from the state.
But, yeah.
And they're still going to take place in grades 3 through 10. And so there's still going to be pressure to perform well on those because we're a high performing district.
Yeah.
That affects our taxes. That's what brings people here.
Good.
Yeah, they're not going away.
No, it's not going away, but
There could be a shift in the next few years towards end of course assessments, but we're not there yet. All right, so hold that thought because it gets more complex.
Great. Oh, wow.
Okay, we won't go into details, but Denny has spent the last year with principals and with special education coordinators looking at the elementary schedules, which your children have all lived through. Basically, they have come to realize that there's a lot to happen in 6.5 hours. And with the implementation of Reveal Math, do you want to do these couple slides? Or are you testing me to see if I can do it? Implementation of Reveal Math, which needs a block of time. We know that the new ELA program is going to need a block of time. There's growing social emotional needs, which we saw before the pandemic, and that has just exploded since the pandemic. And we have a responsibility to certain DESE required frameworks that we're supposed to cover so they're prepared for middle school, so they're prepared for high school, and they can pass the MCAS. So Denny's essential question was, how can the schedule be used as a tool to raise student achievement while better meeting students' academic and social emotional needs? Because we have to do all of that. So they looked at the current Chickering and Pine Hill schedules. They looked at comparable districts, which are the same districts we always look to. They looked at research about what does research say elementary schedules should look like, and they got staff feedback from over 50 staff members across different classrooms and disciplines at the elementary level. What they found is that students need more time on the required frameworks, which include science, social studies, health, technology, and engineering. That there's now a mandate that the math and ELA curriculum that you adopt needs a block of time. It can't be split up during the day. Students who do not receive the what I need interventions, oftentimes that time could be used more effectively. So how can we tweak that with giving kids what they need, but also making sure that not everybody is waiting for attention, and that SEL skills need to have a little bit more direct instruction from our classroom teachers. So one of the changes across both Chickering and Pine Hill that's being proposed is that kindergarten through 5th grade, every child across both elementary schools is going to have 6 specials throughout the week. Art, music, PE, Spanish. Library is going to be built into the schedules, which sometimes it's not. It's more of a, work it out with a librarian. Come 4th and 5th grade, we'll switch library with technology to make sure that they're learning not only the library skills, but the technology media pieces of that as well. Technology will have a designated time in student schedule, again, a benefit, a pro of this change. And then in 4th and 5th grade, if a student doesn't want to be in the band to play an instrument, they're still going to have access to music, learning, and knowledge and appreciation, which is a great addition too. The big change you'll notice is the Spanish. So for those of you who had kids who came through the middle and high school, mine included, we had the FLES model, which was Spanish ideally 4 times a week for 30 or 40 minutes, K to 12, and by the time they got up to the middle school, they were supposed to have a certain level of proficiency to then run with. That has gotten eaten away with over time, and so hold that thought. So when you look at the 3 models of elementary Spanish programs, there's immersion, which you hear about in some of our neighboring districts where students are, in English and a different language 50% of the day or 100% of the day. They're in that target language. And the goal is to, become native fluent speakers, in that subject across all academics. That is not what we had here. That was not what was, meant to be. What we have had, but unfortunately have kind of eaten away at a little over time, is the proficiency model, where we'd have students in elementary school have 90 to 150 minutes a week of Spanish. It'd be cumulative, builds on each other from year to year, tied to the ACTFL standards, which is whether you're at a novice, proficient, advanced speaking level. And the goal is to develop, by the end of 5th grade, the ability to speak, listen, read in the target language at a novice, mid, or novice high level, so that when you go into the middle school, you're not starting Spanish from scratch. Or if you change to French or Latin, you already have kind of a base to give you a leap ahead. What we're moving towards or proposing to the elementary school committees is that we go to an exploratory model, which is a flex model, which is, again, that every child K to 5 would have 1 Spanish period a week. The emphasis is not on proficiency of the language, but more on getting kids engaged and exposing them to it, and really having that cultural awareness and appreciation of another language and another culture, build basic vocabulary and comfort and confidence before they go to the middle school. So that's where we're headed at the elementary level. Also refining the WIN blocks, so doing 20-minute WIN periods at both elementary schools, starting a new SEL curriculum, and really making a predictable schedule so that the kids know what's coming. They have long blocks of time without being interrupted. Of course, we don't want any 60-minute block to be the same activity, but they're not dropping literacy to go to a special and then coming back to finish literacy. So that was the goal there. So what is the implication there? Is going from having Spanish 3 or 4 times a week to 1 means that there's going to be a reduction in both schools of Spanish teachers. And we have currently 2 PE teachers at Chickering. 1 is retiring, and we are going to translate that person from being a PE teacher. We're going to hire a health teacher who will then be split across Pine Hill and Chickering, so that there'll actually be a health curriculum that the students are accessing K to 5. So budgetarily, Dover is finding a savings of $178,000 because of this, and Pine Hill of $39,600. So again, these decisions this conversation started a year ago. It did not intend to have an impact on a tough budget year, but that's the impact. Part 3, you ready? Any questions about Spanish or elementary school?
Because I remember when my daughter first started, she was taking Spanish twice a week. When did that change?
From being 4 times a week?
Because right now I think she's only doing it once a week. No?
No.
So at Pine Hill, in kindergarten and 1st grade, they do it twice a week.
Okay.
And then we get to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you do it 3 times a week.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Is health and wellness mandated by the state? K through 5? Okay.
Technology and engineering, science, social studies, literacy, math, not world language.
Okay.
Is health once a week? Like
It's not scheduled in yet, because we're probably going to do a push-in model into the gen ed classrooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
PL teachers coming in for maybe 1 week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, depending on the grade level. Obviously, in 5th grade right now, we've had this kind of hodgepodge model of the human growth and maturation lessons. The health teacher would be able to cover that rather than have to rely on our classroom teachers and other nurses and whatnot to do that. So we would kind of really have to feel that out, figure out. Sometimes it would dovetail well with science. Sometimes it would dovetail well with social studies and ELA stuff. So we would have to work out a schedule of how that health teacher pushed in.
So keep in mind that we're adding health to the elementaries in a more formal way than it's ever been. We are blocking out library and technology so that every student has it every week. And we're adding band or music workshop for the kids who don't play an instrument. If you go back to this, guess who was supposed to help with that? And
Yeah.
finally, revisiting the science and social studies standards K to 12, finding the resources, the curriculum to make that happen, to support the teachers for all of these
So
increases in time.
So who will do that now? Denny and you again?
Denny, the principals, the coaches will have to juggle curriculum and coaching, and consultants.
This obviously isn't our purview. Just question, how come music is still twice a week in 4th and 5th grade?
Because you have general music and then you have band.
Band cannot substitute for general music.
We looked at the comparable districts. Almost every district has general music and then has, in addition to that, band. And a lot of districts, they, in addition to band, also offer strings. So it's pretty standard across elementary schools.
What you will find, though, is a change in 3rd grade. Currently, in both elementary schools, the students have general music and recorder. Recorder is now going to be part of general music. So that does open up some time in 3rd grade. Okay, so that's that. Part 3. So for those of you who have sat on elementary school committees, whether it's Sherburne or Dover, you know that every year we take the 3rd grade, we roll it up to 4th grade, we divide by 18 to 22 and figure out how many sections we need. Sometimes it's the same number. Sometimes we have a 5th grade rolling off that was huge and a small kindergarten coming on, and we say, oh, we have one extra section. Thank goodness there's a retirement. We don't have to, displace a teacher, and so we just don't hire for that position. Otherwise, sometimes we have to. This is something that happens every year at the elementary level. It doesn't happen so often at the middle school and high school because middle school and high school scheduling is so much more complicated. At the middle school, and I was a middle school teacher, we do what is evidence-based and best for kids is they're on a team. So you go from having elementary, one classroom teacher who teaches everything, to the middle school where you have 4 teachers who communicate about the same 80 kids, right? You're on a team, sun, moon, lightning, thunder. And that is amazing for the kids. And I am all for it. That's the model I taught in. And it's not necessarily efficient because you sometimes might have, your group of 4 teachers might have a cohort of 70. Sometimes you have a cohort of 120, but you still need the 4 teachers regardless. So we are preserving that. At the high school, as you know, students take CP, honors, AP. They have their mandated courses, through sophomore, junior-ish year. Then they have some choice. And what we've always been recommended by and noticed and acknowledged for is the number of electives that we offer to students as a tiny school. And we rarely say, no, we can't make that work in your schedule. We find ways for kids to take all the classes that they want to take. And that is what makes DS special. So when you start saying, well, maybe we can reduce an English teacher here or half the history teacher, the problem there is you're starting to eat away at that flexibility and the access to the programming for the kids. And if we were to say we're going to reduce, an English teacher by 0.5, that means we're going to hire a 0.5 teacher. So we hire a 0.5 teacher, and the minute that Wellesley has a 1.0 position open up, guess where that teacher's going? So our classroom becomes a revolving door. Having less than a 1.0 teacher is not ideal. So very rarely do we look at enrollment at the middle school and high school like we do at the elementary school or at all. However, we're at kind of a tipping point. In Massachusetts in general, we're seeing a decline in enrollment of school-age students, and nationally. In Massachusetts, they're saying at this point we're seeing kind of a decline of 15,000 students from what had typically been normal in the past. Why? Demographic shifts, lower birth rates, higher housing costs and population shifts, and then post-pandemic changes. As you know, many families opted to homeschool their children or go to private schools during the pandemic because either they could teach them at home and not have to worry about the computer with the teacher on it, or they could send them because private schools were often in session 5 days a week all day. And some families have decided to maintain that model and then send their younger families through. Dover and Sherburne Middle School and High School are seeing a decrease in enrollment, as is every other town in Massachusetts. How much? So if you look back to 2019, the high school had 679 students. Right now, rolling into 27, we're predicting, as you saw in your budget projections, 557 students next year at the high school, which is a difference of 122 students. And then in 2030, we're looking at the high school dipping to 524 students, which is an additional 33 students. So you're looking at over 150 students different between 2019 and 2030. The middle school, just before the pandemic, you had 524 students. Next year, we're projecting 447, which is 77 fewer. And in 2031, we're looking at going as low as 400 at the middle school. Not because we're doing anything wrong or differently, it's just the way things are happening. And I've looked at private school numbers. Those aren't increasing. We just have fewer school-aged kids. So we're at a tipping point where you could say 122 students divided by 18 is at least 6 sections, which is a teacher. without affecting scheduling or class size. And in order to be fiscally responsible and fair to the elementaries, which is where we do this all the time, we need to look at those numbers. So how will we do that? We're going to look at staffing with current projections. We're going to take advantage of retirements whenever possible, because we certainly don't want to have to lay off teachers unless it's absolutely necessary. And some of our newest teachers are just incredible, and we would not want to see them go. So wherever we can take advantage of our retirement and not filling that position, we will. We don't want any of our shifts or reductions to affect class sizes, which we know are very appealing. We don't want students to not get access to the courses that they need. So how can we kind of trim without cutting at the bone and without kids really feeling the impact? So we feel like we can maintain student class sizes of about 17. And you will see in a moment that we're going to be reducing counselors at the high school and the middle school. At the high school, the ratio of a counselor to 185 students is what the new number will be. That was what it was about 10 years ago. Now they're lower. But we're just going back to what it was, and the counseling team feels like this is very appropriate. It's comparable to our other, local districts, and the guideline is 250. The state average is like almost 300, so we're in really good shape. So what does that mean for staffing adjustments because of kids? So right now, we have an administrator who is half pre-K and half out-of-district coordinator. And we're saying we can eliminate that administrative position by taking the pre-K responsibilities and giving them to the special education coordinator at Pine Hill School, which will save Chickering $20,000 and Pine Hill $38,000. Then we're going to take the out-of-district administrator half position and get rid of that, and instead create a teaching position who will manage the out-of-district students. And as you know, as our special education programming has expanded, we have students now who are all the way through K through 9, who may or may not go to post-secondary schools, who need to build some skills about life, not only in school, but in the community, and prepare to be independent or almost independent when they graduate. And so we need someone who can start teaching them those skills, taking them out of the building, getting them prepared for life after DS. And so we're advocating for a teaching position that would do the out-of-district and that really important work. So that's actually an addition of $30,000 to your budget. At the high school, we're looking at retirements. So there's one history teacher retiring. We wouldn't fill that position. The good news is the high school is not going to lose 5 sections of teaching, because we have another teacher who's a 0.8. We'll bring that teacher up to a 1.0, so you're only losing 4 sections. And then we have 2 high school guidance counselors retiring. We're not going to replace one of them, which brings us to that 185 number caseload that you saw in the last. And then at the middle school, we're looking at reducing our guidance counselors from 3 to 2. We had 2 forever and ever and ever. And then a couple years ago, we added a 3rd guidance counselor, given the way of the world, and thought, wouldn't it be great for there to be 3 counselors, one for 6th grade, one for 7th grade, one for 8th grade. They follow the kids all the way through. That is ideal, but looking at the numbers of kids we have in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade now, that's a nice to, not a need to. So we're going to reduce one position there, which saves your regional budget $290,000 with those 3 positions. Then you have other retirements in all 3 districts, so if you think about the budget asks you've had over the last few years, generally speaking, our asks of the towns have been like 3%, 4%, 5% increase over the previous year. If you look just at our salaries alone, and 80% of our budget is salaries, our teachers' salaries are increasing more than 3, 4, 5%, and those sitting on the negotiation table know this well now. How do we counter that to get our overall ask down to 3, 4, 5 when the salaries are higher than that? It's by when an educator retires, instead of hiring someone at the top of the scale at $131,000, we hire someone who's at like the master's level and save ourselves $50,000 or $60,000, which helps us balance our budget so that we're not always asking for 7 or 8% from the towns. So that said, Dover, we're still calculating final decisions about how much we'll save there. Sherburne's going to save about $125,000, and at the region, you'll save $116,000 on retirements that are being replaced.
Does that number include salary and like health benefits and everything?
No, that's just salary only. Because health benefits, we don't really look at that way, because not everyone takes health.
Okay.
Right, and then for the retirement numbers, if those people are replaced, that person can still take health care.
Okay.
So, we're not seeing enough of a reduction that's going to have an impact on our normal usage of our health care.
Right, so like the salaries are moving from 130 to 70, but the healthcare cost is still 25,000 or whatever.
Yeah, if they take healthcare, yeah.
Okay, just wondering.
So if you think about the 3 buckets we just went through, ideally we'd move forward with 2 curriculum coordinators. I don't think that we're in a place where we should be eliminating teachers. I think we need to wait and see how the dust settles before we add administrators, and make sure that we don't need that money back for teaching positions if there, is a shift next year that we weren't anticipating. I know it's disappointing.
Beth, I have a question. Sorry for interrupting. But can you go back to the last slide?
Yep.
Like, do you have a slide that breaks down the savings per town?
Don's going to go over that with you in a minute.
Okay, 'cause
Yeah.
that's more important.
Yeah.
And then the teachers renegotiate every 3 years, and this just happens to coincide with renegotiate. That's the extra layer.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Understand.
So right now, in order to save money, so we are tying it to the budget. Our instructional leadership model, we're saying, well, we need that money to help Sherburne and Dover's budgets. Know that the elementary schedule change with going from Spanish 3 or 4 days a week to 1 would happen regardless of budget. That is what's best for kids. That's been studied, and that's what we're moving forward with. It just happens to have positive budget implications for both towns, like positive good, not positive more. And then of looking at staff, I think just like we do at the elementary level, making it routine. For years, we've said we can't do this at the region because it's going to affect the team model. It's going to affect core sizes, and I do think we're at a tipping point when you're talking about 100 or 150 kids in each school. So we would probably be making, I know we'd be making these decisions regardless of budget, but again, they are having a positive impact on budget. And Don will go over your budget version 2.0 in a moment. So Kevin, to your point, you can see how these numbers trickle down to the region. Happy to share with you the Sherburne budget. Chickering's not quite done, version 2.0, outside of this meeting. But do know that with all of these shifts, we're about to meet Sherburne's expectation of cutting $1 million. $500,000
For their piece. Yeah. So I think the only piece that is causing us to pause is adding in the curriculum coordinators. The rest of this stuff we'd be doing regardless of what the towns are asking us for. So you see where we stand like now. We're making decisions that we would have made anyway. The one decision that does have a budgetary impact that would change the scenario is adding the curriculum coordinator. So I think that we're bringing forward what we are looking at from a fiscal responsibility, not necessarily what's best for the school district.
Because from a budget perspective, like you've already, in other years, if there wasn't as much constraint, you may have replaced this history teacher, like with the retirement, or
No.
like you would have.
Nope.
Yeah, I don't think so, because there comes a point where, we love small class sizes, but
Yeah.
for us to sit here and say to the taxpayers we're being fiscally responsible by making sure that our class sizes are in the, 15 to 18 range, I think we're
Not
below
10.
that at this point.
And I think the feeling is that this is not going, we don't have to offer as many sections of a particular
Right, you're not losing
rate.
class
We're not
selection
losing
right
a
now.
class selection.
So not having not hiring the 2 coordinators, what impact does that have on our teachers and on dining? Is that a risk of losing teachers because they're stretched too thin?
No, it's going to be business as usual for them. I do feel for the elementary teachers who are going to be picking up more science, more social studies, and kind of redefining health and all of those things.
But
I
wouldn't
don't
that
want to speak for you.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, sorry, oh my goodness. A lot of what's going to have to get picked up on the secondary level is going to be from the middle school curriculum leaders and the high school department heads. So some things like curriculum reviews that we want to do, planning professional development, are things that they're going to have to continue to take responsibility for, and I'll work with them as best I can to coordinate everything. But we are going to have to continue to expect them to help us pick up with some of them, principals and assistant principals. So we're all hands on deck district, and we'll continue to do that. But I think that we could have, provided much better professional learning experiences for our teachers, and I think that our students would have felt those outcomes with them. But I do very much understand, Beth and I being former educators, it's hard when you see things being reduced as a teacher and see like, oh, but they're adding administrators. Like that's a hard thing, regardless of how they're connected or not connected. I understand that perspective as well.
I also want to be clear that we are reducing an administrator between the pre-K and out-of-district coordinator. One, the work is moving over to another administrator, and second, the work is moving into a new teaching position that we're adding. One comment was made that, what else can we do at central office? And I just want to be clear, because you all sit with us and listen to us every Tuesday. I don't think you can have much less than a superintendent, assistant superintendent, director of student services, and business administrator. We have fewer administrative assistants in this district than we ever have. The business office has not increased. It has actually decreased in numbers. We do not have a human resource person. If you go to any other comparable district, they have more than us.
No, there's a basic
There's nothing more to cut.
There's a basic infrastructure. Even if we lost another 100 students, like I don't know what
infrastructure. It would cut us.
The infrastructure still needs to be infrastructure.
Right. And to be clear, with the curriculum coordinator positions, every other district has them in some way, shape, or form. We have not yet had them, and we will not, and we are purposely making that decision because we want to make sure the kids' education is not affected as we make these changes. And when the dust settles, if money becomes available, we'll revisit it.
I know we discussed it last time also, but but after all this, I would like to again see if there is some new knowledge about it. So I know that Mr. Smith was talking about the robotics and the cybersecurity, and I remember you mentioning that we are going to probably have the teachers who are teaching the computer science, they're going to go ahead and teach them. There's no new hiring in that.
Well, I think there's some thinking that there might be some folks in the technology and engineering department that can maybe do robotics. Data science, I haven't been part of that conversation yet.
Either.
But that's going to fall in the department chairs, in terms of thinking about what's best, what's happening in the world, how do we need to adapt here, what new courses do we need, what new curriculum. So again, that will fall back on the department chairs to do.
Thank you.
We talked about if we were going to go this direction and hiring the two, that it would be for the different STEM and the other side, K through 12. But if we're considering one, might it make sense to rethink that? And if the pain is at the elementary level, putting one or half a person towards helping out those teachers, addressing all these new changes.
It's a possibility, and the Dover and Sherburne committees met before you. Their contribution towards, the equation would shift a little bit. Dawn, help me with my math here.
So you saw their number was smaller, right? Because we're spreading the instructional leadership in the same allocation percentages that we do Denny's position. So Beth and I are like 30, 30, 30, or 33, 33, 34. When this position was created, it was budgeted at 60% of the salary is at the region and 20%. So it's a much smaller ask when you look at it that way. So it was only as Beth's slide showed, it was only $56,000 ask for the two elementaries, but it was $168,000 for the region. Yeah. And add into that the need that for every dollar to get Sherburne $1, it's double. So that's like looking, to build that in, it's like looking for 330. It's a big chunk of money that we'd have to find to be budget neutral. So that the equation gets harder at the region.
At the elementary level, we could hire one, and it would probably be like a $70,000 split between the two elementary schools. I mean, that might be something that they explore. Thank you for the idea. And they already have $20,000 each built into their budget for consultants, which wouldn't be necessary if we had these positions. You already have $32,000 built in for consultants that you wouldn't need if you had these positions. So they do have a base. It's just a matter of whether or not the school committees and towns can find the rest.
I have two questions. So what curriculum does, for example, Medfield use?
For which content area?
ELA or math?
So for math, they're using illustrative math at the elementary level, and they just made a recommendation for a new elementary literacy program. I believe the recommendation was Bookworms.
Gotcha. Is there any of these towns? So like you could have a built-in shared model, and you can even split the difference. So if there's only two of them, have you ever looked into a district of having someone who has the same curriculum as us split the difference? Especially someone who already has the curriculum that's in place. So if someone has Reveal and someone has our new curriculum, you could, just theory, you could double dip in expertise and reduce budget.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is none of our local districts have Reveal. I think the closest might be Linfield.
Okay, so yeah, a little far.
And then for ELA, we don't know where we're going to end up.
All right.
Let me ask another probably crazy question, but has there ever been a time where if one town doesn't have the money and another does, that like Dover could pay more? No.
They don't want the burden, no.
Yeah,
It's not fair, yeah.
And my other question was, you can answer or not answer. What's more weighing on this, the budgetary concerns or the negotiation concerns?
I think the budgetary concerns, just wanting to make sure that the shifts we're making at the classroom level are sustainable and don't affect the kids' programming. I mean, the negotiation table, all the proposals are out. You have all built in a reserve to meet some sort of increase next year.
Okay.
There has been floated out there the idea of, or concern that there's going to be no raise for teachers.
Oh, that's
not true.
Outside the purview of the question. But yeah, I guess, but because where I work at, we do like emergency credentials, and we bring someone in for a short period of time with a limited span. It's a way of kicking the can before you hire someone full-time for something.
Yeah, well, keep thinking of ideas. We're open to creativity. And, in the meantime, we do great things. Our kids are well prepared and are loved, and we'll keep doing our best. So now we'll get feedback from you. You'll have time between now and your March meeting to chew on this and see, your thoughts. We're meeting with the Dover and Sherburne advisory and warrant committees to present where we land with version 2.0 of your budgets, which you'll see in a minute. Dawn is going to continue to find savings. Some questions are still unanswered. Dawn, do you want to speak to those?
Well, we do it.
Okay, yeah. And then, like I said, we're making these shifts. We're going to continue to look at student learning data, instructional practices, educator feedback, and progress towards our district goals. And, should there be a need halfway through next year, this time next year, we're going to advocate for what's best for kids. And that's it.
And just on the elementary changes, that will be decided at the next elementary.
So yeah, so
they have to vote on it.
Yeah, the elementary has to vote to move from a proficiency model of Spanish to a exploratory model. And
that's the one thing we vote on, not the health teacher.
Right.
Just
and
the change in the plus.
That's going to have a budgetary impact, which they need to know by March. So they're going to have a special Zoom meeting on February 24th to vote.
Thank you.
Okay, so we didn't include this piece of tonight's meeting in your packet because we felt that the presentations were important to hear, to provide context to this, because if I put this in the budget without context, you probably all would have been like, what the heck is going on? So at the region, looking at version 2.0, there's two pieces of the region. We have revenue at the region, which we don't have revenue that we look at the two local school districts. So on the revenue side, what has happened is that the governor's fiscal year 27 budget was released last week, and with that is new updated minimum local contribution amounts for the town. So then there's a certain amount that when they calculate the foundation, that DESE's saying, okay, the towns, Dover has to pay at least this amount and Sherburne has to pay at least this amount before you spread what's different. So I'm always anxious to see, because there have been years where the swing in the minimum local contribution has negatively impacted Sherburne. I don't know if you remember, there was 1 year where it was like, without even changing anything in the budget, Sherburne's assessment went up like $120,000 just because of the minimum local contribution. So that's something, as soon as it hit the press, I was printing and looking at it. So I'm happy to say that this year, the swing was less than $7,500. So Sherburne picked up a little bit more. If I had done nothing else to the budget, Sherburne would have picked up $7,500 and Dover went down $7,500. We can handle $7,500. So that's a good, that was a good change. The other piece is it does give us insight into projected revenues for both Chapter 70 and then Chapter 71, which is your transportation. So with those new numbers, we're able to add additional revenue resources to version 2.0 of that 122,676. So if you think about how the formula works, you take our total budget, and then we have the region has revenue sources. So we take off all the revenue sources, and then we only had to assess to the towns what's left. So 122,676 comes off what we have to assess the town. So that's a positive thing. Now tying in some of the numbers that Beth had in her presentation, you'll see that version 2.0 reflects the retirement savings of 116,000 and then the reduction in positions of 290,000. It incorporates the transition special education educator, that $30,000 increase. Based on student needs, we are reducing one special ed educational assistant, and that's based on the projection of our caseloads at the middle school and the high school. So that's a savings of $36,000. And then as we discussed, because we are not moving forward with the curriculum coordinators, we're increasing our district-wide professional development budget by $32,000 so that we can address some of the curriculum development supports to help supplement what the department heads and curriculum leaders would do, and to also give Denny a little bit more assistance in the work that we have to do. So looking at that now, our overall budget increase is just 3.72%, down from the 5.03% in version 1.0. And that's pretty typical because there's revenues that we don't know about. So even if we did not make any expense changes, we always see a decrease because and best case scenario is that we're actually going to see some increase in the support we get from the state. There are some unanswered pieces of the puzzle, with one of the largest being our healthcare premium cost. This Thursday, the steering committee is meeting, and we'll see sort of the first pass of what the proposed interest rates, proposed healthcare costs are going to be. They're in the process of scheduling the final board meeting where the West Suburban Health Group Board will vote. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be February 12th, so I won't have that number finalized for our February 11th meeting with the two towns, but I should have some pretty good insight as to where it's going to go. So we can at least share that information on February the 11th based on the meeting I'll have this Thursday. In addition, we'll keep looking at utilities, and we'll also keep looking at any revenue surpluses that we have in fiscal year 26 that we can apply through our use of E&D. So keep in mind, your version 1.0 was built with using $150,000 of E&D. There could be some additional revenue surpluses that we can increase that number once we come down to March. But those are unknowns, and we'll have to wait and see. I want to remind everyone that the numbers that we are sharing tonight are in addition to the out-of-district assessments, and those have not changed. So anytime you see in the numbers here for the region's operating budget, you got to keep in mind that you've got to add 1.375 million to Dover's number and 1.125 to Sherburne's. And again, that's just a reshifting of the costs from the elementary budgets to the region. And we don't have any changes to those. There could be some changes in version 3.0. My hope is it's not to the negative, it's to the positive. But we also have to be very conservative with that, because just keep in mind the accounting. When the region assumes those responsibilities, if we haven't adequately assessed the towns and we have a shortfall, that's where we're going to have a little bit of an issue. So we have to be careful with how we budget that for the current year. So if you look over on your the second page of your handout, you'll sort of see where we take all the budget adjustments and you get down to your new budget of the $30,170,188. At the bottom, you will see where I compare the total assessments for the towns, version 1.0 versus 2.0, and that's where you see the savings. So Dover's assessment's going down $269,725. Sherburne's is going down $232,951. For those of you in Sherburne, I will say that the number that we shared for the Sherburne local budget tonight was a savings of $218,600. So when you add those two numbers together, that's where we're about at the 450 right now. So we are sort of close to the $500,000 that we were asked to see if we could accommodate.
Give me those two numbers again.
The two
For Sherburne.
The Sherburne, yeah.
Yeah.
The 232,951.
I see that, yeah.
And then what you don't have is what we presented to the Sherburne
Okay.
School Committee
Okay.
tonight.
Okay.
So that's, because that's dollar for dollar that Sherburne is seeing a reduction.
Got it, okay.
That's 218,600. So
Yeah.
combined it's 451.
Got it.
551.
And keep in mind that I think what makes the number requests from Sherburne different this year is that they're trying to get below where they don't have to do a 2.5% override. Right, because we always have budgetary, like Sherburne's always saying, please get your number lower. I think they're being harder about it and giving us actual numbers because they're trying to get down to where they don't have to worry about an override, at least for fiscal year 27.
The problem is now that they've eaten up their excess, right? They can only increase basically their budgets from one year to the next by 2.5%. You know, and again,
It'll
in
be
a
an
typical
override
year,
next year.
we're looking at 3, 4, 5%. We're the majority of both towns' budgets. So we're going to be tightening the reins forevermore at this point in Sherburne. So,
Yeah, unless they get more property grants. So they
That's not happening in a year though. So.
No.
I think the override is going to have to happen at some point. It's just a matter of when.
Understand.
In addition, you have if you're more interested, you've got the calculation of the assessment, which is always fun to see. And then I reworked your operating revenue summary and your expenditures so that you can see the gross numbers and how that plays out at a more lower level. Remember, we don't do the big sheets. We don't change all those. So this just gives you a year mark where we're showing you where we compare to fiscal year 26 budget at this point. On the back of the cover memo, there are all the other key dates in the budget timeline. So we are meeting with Dover, Warren, and Sherburne Advisory here next Wednesday night. Then at your March 3rd meeting is your public open hearing where we will bring forward version 3.0. You'll have your public hearing, we'll close that, and then you will vote for your final budget number. And then the advisory, Sherburne's open hearing is on Saturday, March 21st, and Dover's is on Thursday, March 9th. And then we have our 2 annual meetings. So we have to get through all of those before we actually have an official approved budget. That's why we like to share all these dates with you. And adding to that is capital budget. These play into that because we're moving forward. We'll have to fund the request we have right now for the high school roof restoration through an IMA, and those are also ballot dates. So if that comes to be, I'll add the election dates on here. We are on schedule to have a finalized bid, not as early as I hoped, but we should have it in time to let the towns know, and then we may just need to have a little extra meeting on one of your April dates to vote, or have an extra meeting. I have to wait and see what the number plays out, but it's going out to bid next Friday, and then we just have to follow the whole bid process to get that. But we're on par, I think, or on hopefully on par, depending on what's happening out there in the world, to have a bid that hopefully comes in less than $2 million that we have a placeholder for at the town level at this point. So that is a summary of version 2.0 of your operating budget, and then an update on your capital budget.
Thank you, Dawn.
It's a lot.
How's the roof doing with the ice and snow?
Ask me when it gets warm enough to start smelling.
Yeah, it sounds like it's pushing everything.
No, that's
Oh, it's not.
that's just the creaking of all of our. No, the middle school roof is great. Like, we're doing the roof restoration. If you look at Google Earth, you'll see that the rooftops of like this on the middle school are like white.
Yeah.
And that the high school is still the black asphalt. So next summer, after you'll do a Google Earth, and you'll see that it'll all be white. We have actually had an uptick in repairs on both the high school buildings, more so the high school gym. It is definitely a needed repair, and if we waited much longer, we wouldn't be a candidate for the restoration. So we're hitting that project just right.
Okay.
Moving on, any other questions on the budget? Because the other thing we want to do is just update you on fiscal year 26. Sometimes
Back to reality.
Yeah, to talk about where we are. So in your packet, you have your accounts payable warrants. And I forgot to bring your folder, Jeff. I'll bring it tomorrow night. Of all the warrants that we have processed since your last meeting. And you also have your financial statements as of January 31st. The new piece of information on the revenue is that we have received our first installment of our Chapter 71 transportation payment. It reflects an 80% reimbursement rate based on what they had given out now, but I have been involved in some conversations around both fiscal year 27 budget and what we're anticipating for fiscal year 26. And they're telling us that at the state level for 26, we should be looking at closer to a 90% reimbursement rate. Fortunately, we don't get that second payment that would tell us if that's really going to happen until June. But if we do get 90% versus the 80% of the payment that we've sort of reflective of right now, that could be an extra $90,000, $89,000 in revenue. So that's something that we may play around with when we're looking at getting the budget to where we need to get it. On the expenditure side, keep in mind that the bold information is the new information. Otherwise, it's the same information that you have. It's just now in your statements. We did a rough projection of utility cost. I will say there's a lot of changes going on our utility bills that we're working with Eversource and our utility supply consultants to better understand. Once I understand them, I can explain it to you. But because of that, we're seeing larger increases in our monthly bills than I would prefer to see, and I just need to understand why and if it's correct or if it's an error. So we are looking in our spare time. We're dealing with our utility bills.
So it's that big of a swing.
What'd you say?
It's that big of a swing.
There's one of the changes I'm seeing is that we never were charged differently for if we were using electricity on demand during peak time and non-peak time. And I thought we sort of, because we're a public entity,
Right.
We are now, and I'm trying to figure out if that is correct, change, or, because that's where, obviously, when do we use the most power during peak time, like, right? We're a school. And I think that's why we used to be held harmless from that. But yes, I'm seeing a huge change to our supply costs. I mean, our delivery cost, not our supply cost, but our delivery cost. Enough that it made me dig in and see like what was happening. So we are working on that right now. The other thing that we talked about, but I hadn't put it in my report yet, is that our E&D was certified. So I bolded that and put all that information in there for you.
Okay. Makes you want to not use that? Just kidding. Is that it for our discussion on the financials?
Unless you have any questions, that's all
Any
I have
questions?
to share.
Okay. So now we're on to the action items, which is the minutes from the meeting of December 2nd, 2025. And also a donation for $500, right? Yes. And to be used by the DS Robotics team. It's provided by the Zoo family. Is that how I say it?
The zoo, yeah.
And on behalf of their child. And so to accept that. And then also the approval for the regional school committee for an overnight trip to Dartmouth College for the DSHS Inquiry Club, and they're going to participate in the Dartmouth College Model UN Conference. Is that new? Didn't it used to be at Harvard or what now?
It used to be at Tufts.
Tufts.
Yep, and now it's at Dartmouth.
Okay, so those three, and we can vote on those three together. So is the minutes, did anybody see anything that needed to be changed or adjusted? I did not. They seemed very long. It seems like it was a very long meeting.
It was.
I'm just looking at this going, whoa. And then as for if you have any questions about the donation for the robotics team or about the overnight to Dartmouth for the Model UN. If there is none, do I have a motion to approve these three action items, being the minutes, the robotics, and the Model UN?
Jeff Cassidy moved to approve.
Second? Kevin, second?
Second, Kevin Crotty.
All right, and can we don't have to roll call for this, do we?
We're all here.
Because we're all here. All right, all in favor? Okay, there's no one opposed. Great. Okay, so those action items have passed. And that's
Just
it.
for new members, so, next Wednesday night, it's all of Dover Warrant and all of Sherburne Advisory.
Their financial committees.
Their financial committees, so,
Like we had for the turf.
yes, when they all came, yeah, but they'll be more part of the, it's their meeting. We're guests at their
Oh,
2
you
meetings.
don't get prime seating.
Yeah.
On February 11th.
We'll make it, hopefully, we usually try to do a square that we can all fit in there. But, hopefully, feel free, I'm just gonna say, feel free to, give your feedback. They want your guys' feedback. They want you to know that you care and you understand the budget and you're gonna support it. So, don't know what direction it'll go, obviously. With what we have to present right now, it should not be a bad meeting. It's, we've met, they can't beat up on us too much. We've sort of met their requests in Dover. Dover's seeing a nice impact as well because they're even seeing a larger savings from the movement from Flex to Flex.
Look at you.
University
immersion.
So I think, it should be fairly straightforward, and I hope you appreciate they have been pushing us and on certain things, and I think where, like Beth said, we were at the tipping point on enrollment. I think we had to make changes in order to be able to justify our budget. So.
Are you able to bake in all those changes, or it's with a caveat that it still needs approval from the Dover School Committee on the elementary changes? I know everything else is.
So
kind of
when
baked
we
in.
meet with them, it's just the region budget.
Aha, okay.
We meet separately. Remember, we used to go
Yeah,
separate.
that's right.
So we meet separate for Dover.
Okay.
Sherburne actually will stay, and Becca Hammond will come, and I can't remember if it's before or after. We gotta look at that, but we do both Sherburne budgets, but not at the same time. So when we meet with them, we're strictly only talking about the region budget.
Okay.
Thank goodness. You too, Laura?
Motion to adjourn.
I'm still hung up on this leadership thing before we adjourn. Like, we're surrounded by large academic institutions that have PhDs and master people. Like, has anybody reached out to these people to finish their PhD projects, their master's projects, dissertations as a pilot?
We hadn't thought of that. I mean,
Interesting.
maybe as consultants, again, they would have to be doing their PhD in.
Yeah, it would be paid for by, there's people just
Looking for this.
looking at stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were Sherborne or if they weren't, but I'm just saying that's another idea.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good suggestion. Nice brainstorm. Thank you, Don and Denny and Beth.
So many people
it's a
need
large
people
lift
to
trying to
use
get this
their
done every year.
ideas. We could
All right, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Lindsay and Mary Waugh seconding. All in favor? All right, guys, we've adjourned at 8:42.